everyone. Hi, my name is Natalie Stokes Peters, and I work with Black Classic Press in Baltimore, Maryland. And we are the publishing company who published the Osiris Papers, reflections on the life and writings of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. Before we get our meeting started, we're going to take a moment and have Wangaza Bandeli do libations for us. So if everyone could please have a moment of silence, and I will turn this over to Wangaza.
Everyone, it is an absolute pleasure to have an opportunity to be with us in the way that we are. Anytime Black folks get together, it's a good thing. So welcome, welcome. And as is our tradition, we would not move forward to do anything of significance without making sure that all of we have been gathered. Those who are in this physical form, you and I, and those ancestors, those energies, those spirits that complete our village. And so it's because new conditions require different ways of being. This digital transmission requires different ways of being. Typically, if we were in the same room together, we would pour using substance to earth. We're going to do it just a little bit different because we accommodate what is required without hesitating to incorporate our traditions. And so I ask today that you pour out your gratitude, that you join heart to heart, mind to mind, and acknowledge with us how grateful we are that we all were in our right minds to bring us here together today in recognition of the good work that's going to be presented in front of us in just a moment. I ask that you pour out an offering of recognition, recognizing that this work would not have been done without the full body, without the gods, without the ancestors. And so we call on and we recognize Odamankama, Trediapon, and Nyame, Oludumare. Call the entity, the energy, what you choose, and we do call. We thank that entity, spirit, for guiding the work. We are grateful for the prayers that were answered through the personage, Frances Cress Welsing. And we invite you to be in the circle today as we recognize and acknowledge and uplift the work that she has done through the celebration of this publication. And so I'm going to say the names of ancestors, and I ask that you join me. You can join me by simply
one guy.
Joseph Tyrone Epps.
Mary Perry.
talking over because I have audio in my ear.
Nelson.
Denise Jones Dorsey.
Can you hold 1 minute, one guy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you grabbing them and muting them when he came in?
I am looking to, everyone should be muted as they came in, but that clearly isn't happening. So I was holding the folks inside the waiting room until we were done. Got to be on time. So I'm going to continue to mute, and then if we're ready, we can let Wangaza continue if you'd like. You let me know.
Thank you. I apologize.
You should continue.
I'm sorry, Wangaza?
All right.
Yes.
Thank you. I apologize.
No worries, no worries. It's really great to be able to have clear recognition that the village is assembling. This is the absolute appropriate time to call forth those villagers who are not physically present. And so again, I ask that you call upon the names of your ancestors, the names of those whose spirit embodies your life, those people who actually have influenced your life, who have brought you clarity, who have brought you information and knowledge that serves your life, who have poured into you such that you could be here today, again, in your right mind, on the path to your embetterment, to our embetterment. And so I'll begin, of course, by calling the name of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, the great ancestor who has called us forward today. I acknowledge her presence. I acknowledge what she has given to us. We celebrate together, again, the prayers that were answered, as I am sure those who contributed to the publication, the writing and the publication of the book, heard her spirit, if not her words. And therefore we get to celebrate that ancestor today. And so I encourage you to call the name of your ancestor. I encourage you to actually use the chat box and write the name of your ancestors. Let us see a litany of names, those who, let us see in writing, who has come, who has received
King
a
Cortez.
for you. And I'm going to stop there because the audio is coming up again. I don't want to talk over. So, digital libation. I'm going to ask, as we close out, again, having written, having spoken, having pulled together, acknowledged, and full recognition that we would not be here without them. We thank you for joining us. And we say Ashe, Ashe, Asheo.
Okay. Thank you, Wangaza, for doing that for us. It definitely was a way to center us as we have so many people coming together right now in this moment, which is really a powerful moment. And I thank you for that. What's going to happen next is I'm going to finish admitting the people who are in the waiting room. I asked them to please wait while we were having a moment. I'll admit everyone. And after that, we'll have Brother Tony Browder, who's also a contributor to this piece, an author, and just an extraordinary person to introduce a short video that we'll have everyone watching, okay? And with that, Brother Tony, I'm going to admit everyone, and then I'm going to find you and unmute you. All right, there you go. All right, so, all right, Brother Tony, you are now unmuted, and I invite you to take the reins, brother.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Natalie, Paul, and everyone else responsible for creating this opportunity for us to meet digitally in troubled times and honor the memory and the legacy of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. For those who have lived in the DC area where Dr. Welsing made her home since the 1970s, you know that she was a frequent guest on WOL, which was the first station owned by Kathy Hughes. And Ms. Hughes and the other radio hosts would always allow Dr. Welsing opportunities to come on to talk about whatever was happening in society and whatever she had on her mind regarding matters that were affecting people of African ancestry. And in 2014, Carl Nelson, who now has a very popular talk show on WOL, organized the Power Talk conferences, where it was an annual event that was held in January of each, in June of each year, where he brought together numerous scholars who had appeared on the show. And for the second Power Talk conference, which was held in June of 2015 at Willie Wilson's church, Union Temple Baptist Church in Southeast DC, we had a special recognition in honor of Dr. Welsing. And I put together this PowerPoint, which we're going to share with you, which is a retrospective of Dr. Welsing's life. We were fortunate to have Dr. Welsing's oldest sister, Lauren Cress Love, who used to manage a radio station here in the DC area, WPFW. And Lauren, who had moved from Washington back to Chicago, was able, along with her sister Barbara, her youngest sister Barbara, they were able to assemble a host of photographs of the Welsing girls, their parents and their family members. And she sent me about over 100 of these photographs, which I assembled in the PowerPoint, which Natalie will share with you now, just to give you a feel of Dr. Welsing, her life, her family, the environment in which she lived and thrived, and those who loved her dearly. So Natalie, let's run the short PowerPoint film.
And actually, Tony, say a few more words about that before we get started, because logistically, I thought you were going to share it, but I can pull it up and we can do that. But Paul, the other option would be for you to go ahead and start to, if you want to talk a little bit more about the book before we get started, we can do that while I pull up that video.
Well,
okay.
So, now go ahead, Paul. Go ahead, Paul.
I'm sorry, Tony. Go ahead and start, and I'll follow you.
Okay. Well, this event was so special for us in that Dr. Welsing was a staple at WOL, And the Power Talk conferences were really centered around the work that Dr. Welsing was doing. So for the second Power Talk conference, which again was held in June of 2015, we honored Dr. Welsing. And she was so totally surprised and awed by the respect that she received from the hundreds of people who were there in the audience. And initially she said she was only going to speak for about 10 minutes. Well, 45 minutes later, she was still pouring her heart out. And it was the last opportunity we had to really hear from Dr. Welsing because she passed away the following January. And she opened up her heart. You know, Dr. Welsing was a very personal and private person, but I recall during her speech that evening, she talked about having met Malcolm. She talked about the experience that she had when her brother-in-law, who was the first Black astronaut, when he died, she had a premonition of his death just moments before his death. So for a woman who was extremely private, she shared her soul with us that evening. And it was a wonderful way for us to remember her and pay tribute to her life. So the PowerPoint that Leslie will be sharing with you in a few minutes will give you an idea of how we have all come to know and love this great woman. So Paul, it's yours.
So Tony, what we'll do, Nat, can we switch up a little?
Absolutely, we need
Let's
to.
do this one on the fly.
We need to do that.
That's good. Let's do it then. So first of all, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and thank you for being on this call. It's truly an honor and a pleasure to have our contributors, our editors on this call, because we were actually supposed to be in Chicago yesterday. This panel that you're seeing, we were supposed to be in Chicago yesterday, and of course, given everything that's happened, we're not in Chicago. So with the aid of technology, we're able to move forward. We're able to move forward and have this discussion and actually have it in a broader sense, because we're reaching people across the country, people who didn't have to fly to Chicago. So I'm really glad that you all are here. We're going to start our discussion, and Ray, since we're switching up, we're going to go back to the format before the video, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And really, I want to thank Wangaza for doing the libation for us and just centering us. It's so very, very important. I got a message from a sister today who was asking whether we were going to present Francis before we started. And I made the call to Wangaza, and she did that. It's so important, the work that Francis left for us, our understanding of white supremacy, because it comes into great need right now. The call that we're going to have not only honors Francis, it honors her work. It recognizes the importance of her work. Ray Winbush, Dr. Ray Winbush, and Ray, if you don't mind, I'm going to read your bio.
Man, you ain't got to do that. Do it.
If you don't mind. Dr. Ray Winbush is a research professor and director of the Institute of Urban Research at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. His research and teaching have been instrumental in understanding developmental stages in Black males and public policy. Connections to compensatory justice. He holds a PhD in psychology from the University of Chicago and is taught at Oakwood, Fisk, Alabama A&M, Vanderbilt, Morgan. He's lectured everywhere you can imagine. He is also the author of 3 books: The Warrior Method, Should America Pay Slavery and the Raging Debate on Reparations, and Belinda's Petition, a concise history of reparations for the transatlantic slave trade. He also is the guiding light that brought all of the contributors together for this work. And Ray, if you could talk and share with us just, you know, first of all, what led you to this? Why did you do this? Also, within this time, if you can share, like, what were the obstacles? You know, what were some of the obstacles that you encountered, aside from working with Paul Coates, okay?
That wasn't a bad obstacle at all. That was good. First, I'd like to thank you, Paul, publicly for the work that you did, and just you, Natalie, and April, just to help to get this book together. You know, France has meant a lot to me. You know, many of you have heard the story that I first met her in 1988 when I was teaching at Alabama A&M, and one of my students had given me a copy of the Cress theory of color confrontation. And I put it on my desk and didn't read it for about a week. And then one night, right before class, I started reading it, and I was just mesmerized by it. Got on the phone, dialed 411, so for some of you oldsters, you remember what that meant, in DC, and Dr. Welsing answered the phone, and I told her I had just read her paper, and that kind of began the friendship that we had for those years. I was meandering in the South at Vanderbilt and Fisk, and of all the people that I've asked to speak at the institutions I've taught, Frances spoke wherever I was. She spoke more than any other person I had requested to speak, and always did it. Back in the 90s, I was running the Race Relations Institute at Fisk, and met Dr. Denise Wright, the co-editor of the book. And Dr. Welsing came down there along with Neely Fuller. And for literally, those workshops lasted for 10 days. They were more than workshops. And we discussed racism, white supremacy in all of its forms with people from literally all over the world. When, you know, she made her transition in 2016, I was, as many of us were, who had heard and worked with her, I was dumbfounded, and I approached Paul to say, look, we need to put together a book. And Paul immediately conceded to do that. We then just started contacting people. Reverend Jeremiah Wright's on this call, Conrad Worrill. There's a variety of people that made contributions to the book. And what we did, we took the 9 areas that Neely Fuller had first posited years ago and had everybody write a chapter based on that. Economics, education, entertainment, and so forth, the 9 areas of racism, white supremacy. And so they had to have known Frances, come in contact with her, knew her writings or whatever. So Chuck D wrote the chapter on entertainment because one of his albums, as you know, Fear of a Black Planet, was dedicated to her. So that's how the book came about. And Denise, my co-editor, I'm gonna let her talk about some of the issues that we confronted while we were writing or editing this book.
You really want me to talk about that?
Some of it.
Yeah, it was.
Denise?
Yes.
Can I read your bio?
Oh, okay.
When I get off of this. And besides, I work to get these things down. Dr. Denise Wright is a graduate of Howard University.
Thank you.
Yes, you. Where she obtained her PhD in psychology. She has taught and lectured at a number of universities, including Howard, American University of Nigeria, Georgetown Medical School, always with a focus on developing cultural competencies for clinicians in the medical and behavioral health fields. She has traveled extensively in West and South Africa the past 20 years, conducting research with academic teams such as the Malawi Medical Laboratory Project. Her research focuses on public health, health disparities, the perception of wellness, as well as the implementation of cognitive, behavioral, and nutritional strategies to reduce clinical presentations of depression and anxiety. that would be a psychological approach to explaining what happens when folks go off. You got it,
Yes.
girl. I know you do it too.
Yes, yes, yes. So thank you so much, Paul. And I want to give a shout out to my sister Andrea, as well as all the other people here who have taken their Sunday out to join us. To segue to what was Winbush was talking about, this book was indeed a labor of love. It was a labor, it was a time of patience. It was a time of integration and collaboration and working together. So that is part of the richness of this book. Also the authors who took out time to write their particular chapters. It was a wonderful thing, and being able to collaborate with all these people. I think that this book also serves as a foundation and is somewhat of a guidepost for what we're seeing right now that's going on with the coronavirus and some of the outcomes that we're seeing right now. Dr. Welsing addressed this when I first met her down at the Institute, but I did not have an appreciation until I got older over the years to understand and implement and understand and look at the lens that she was seeing through with regard to this whole structure. So, you know, once you go to all these different countries and you see all the different types of things with regard to colonialism, discrimination, prejudice, and all these things kind of rolled into one, it kind of informs people of African and African descent about how the system has been functioning, and it's been extremely effective. And I know I had talked to you earlier, Paul, about talking about some of the health issues, and the things that we're seeing right now is just a natural outcome of where, you know, all the years and hundreds of years of white supremacist system that we've been exposed to. We need to, this is a wake-up call for us to come together like we are right now, to address some of the obvious issues that we are having right now, particularly when we're seeing such a pandemic, because this is not going to be the last. This is not going to be the last epidemic or pandemic that we're seeing. We already had a pandemic before this one showed up, but the other one was just somewhat elusive and you know, kind of invisible. But this shows a light on exactly what we've been dealing with. So again, I appreciate everybody being here, and Paul, I'm rolling it back to you.
Thank you, Denise. So if you notice, like what we're trying to do is introduce people, have them speak, have them introduce themselves to you, have them speak. We're gonna go back for a question and answer. And then we're gonna come back around. We're asking you to drop your questions in chat. Those questions are being monitored as this discussion goes along. They're being monitored by Natalie, and April is also there monitoring those questions. So that the folks who are participating on this call will have an opportunity to participate with their questions. Conrad?
Yes.
Oh, great, 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 great. So I get to introduce you too, okay?
Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Conrad Worrill is an acclaimed scholar, educator, and activist. For 40 years, he served as full professor and director of the Jacob H. Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies in Chicago. Conrad's activism has been defined by his leadership in organizations that have been in the forefront of the struggle for racial and social justice, African-centered education, African liberation, and self-determination for people of African descent. As national chairman of the Black United Front, special consultant of field operations for the Million Man March, an economic development commissioner for the Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, or as a street organizer for Harold Washington's mayoral campaign, he has advanced causes such as educational restructuring, human rights, reparations, and political empowerment, always in the interests of the Black community. Conrad, welcome. And if you will, now see, we had the DC side on here so far, the DC and Baltimore side. You have a special contribution because you not only connect Frances with Chicago, her beginnings, but you also connect her with some of the influences. So we know Frances here as a warrior woman. Your piece particularly dealt with her becoming that and dealing with the background of Chicago. First of all, Ray, why you joined Ray and in bringing this book about, and why you felt it significant to present the contribution as you've done it.
Thank you, Brother Paul. So when Ray calls, I usually respond, and it started with my first collaboration with him and the contribution Should America Pay that grew out of the reparations conference that he hosted when he was director of the Race Relations Institute at Fisk. So I've been collaborating with Ray on a number of projects, and somehow I think he knew that I knew a little bit about Frances, and he called to ask me to make a contribution in relationship to Frances Welsing's connection to Chicago. So it's kind of difficult because it's ironic that my father was recruited to come to Chicago in 1950 to head up the historic Wabash YMCA. And years later, how would I know that growing up in the YMCA activities that somehow I interacted with the Cress sisters and didn't even know it. So years later, one of the directors at the Y, the iconic social worker here in Chicago, Othello Ellis, I used to go visit him. He was like my second father. And he said, "Have you ever seen this, Conrad?" And he pulled out a brochure promoting the camp in the 1950s. And on the front of this brochure was Frances, Lauren, and Barbara, and myself as a little young man. I said, this is just too much. So separate relationships on my part of knowing the Cress sisters, we were aware of Lauren because of her activism and becoming a part of SNCC and Friends of SNCC here in Chicago. We knew of Barbara later on in life because of her husband work as being prepared to be an astronaut, but more specifically, her volunteerism in the Harold Washington campaign. Now this is years later, but we knew of Frances from the 60s. So Frances, from time to time, would interact with the great psychologist, Dr. Bobby Wright. And there were debates around her theory and his theories. But Frances grew up in what is called in Chicago today, popularly, Bronzeville. So the Wabash YMCA was at the center of Bronzeville. Frances' father and grandfather were medical doctors, and it is said by Frances that when she was talking with her father one time, her father said that her grandfather should look at melanin. So Frances went to the historic Phillips High School in Chicago that had people like Nat King Cole and John Johnson and Dinah Washington and Sam Cooke and on and on and on, who attended this high school that became a black high school during the period of the 1920s here on the South Side, also in Bronzeville, within 5 or 10 minutes walking from the Wabash Y. So Frances had great impact from her family. Her mother was a teacher for 41 years in the Chicago public school system, also in Bronzeville. When her family settled, her grandfather worked with Ida B. Wells around the anti-lynching movement that emerged here in Chicago. I could go on and on, you gotta cut me off, but she had a deep grounding in Chicago, and word in her family was that her grandfather was a medical doctor, but people referred to him as a race man because he did more work in the community than he did as a physician. So Frances grew up in what some of us call the low end part of Chicago, which was an epicenter for the emergence of Black nationalism and Pan-Africanism. And we say we had our own Renaissance here in Chicago. I might point out, I left out that Gwendolyn Brooks also went to Phillips High School. So Frances' impact from her family, the community, and what is called Bronzeville had tremendous impact on her growth and development and her racial consciousness.
Conrad, I was particularly interested because I thought your chapter gave that kind of background, and I wanted you to share it, so thank you. I thought that to be very important because so many of us, we know Frances full blown, and we don't think, at least I certainly didn't think about Frances when I first crossed her as coming out of a tradition. So thank you for giving that background. I want to say one other thing too. Everybody on this panel had their own personal experiences with Frances. And so you'll hear us go back and forward. Sometimes we'll say Dr. Welsing, and other times we'll say Frances. And it comes out of that experience. Like many people on this call had their personal experiences with her. So she's one of us, and it's just fortunate we get to talk about her as being present. Frances is present, and we get to talk about her that way. Next is Mr., I call him TB, like when we're on the phone, I say Mr. TB. So Tony Browder is with us. He's a very, very, very special brother, a gift to our community, but he's also an author, publisher, cultural historian, artist, and an educational consultant. A graduate of Howard University, he is a captivating and always in demand lecturer who is also the founder and director of IKG Cultural Resources. He has traveled to Egypt 56 times. That's the last count I have. He's probably gone more than that, but 56 times since 1980. And he is currently director of the Asa Restoration Project, which is funding the excavation and restoration of 2 25th dynasty tombs of Kushite noblemen on the west bank of Luxor, Egypt. Browder is the first, he is the first African-American to fund and coordinate an archaeological dig in Egypt, and has led 24 archaeological missions to Egypt since 2009. He's a best-selling author of books, including From the Browder File and Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. Tony also conducts annual study tours to Egypt for students and adults that are not to be missed. Now, I know that was a long introduction. I I condensed it, okay? You got a lot to say. Tony, please share with us. You're not only a contributor to this book, you were, until her last days, a confidant of Dr. Welsing, and someone who she trusted immensely. She respected you, you respected her. You had probably, out of all of us, probably the most personal relationship with her, and most in-depth relationship with her. You knew her, and you responded to Ray when he asked you to write. You responded, why? Inside of that relationship, what was your calling? What brought you to it? The other thing, Tony, can you add in, and I should have asked some other folks, what were the challenges in you writing this chapter on Frances?
I was really quite proud and pleased to be able to contribute to this monumental work. And the biggest challenge for me was editing my thoughts, because there was so much that I wanted to say about Dr. Welsing with regards to my subject matter, which was entertainment. There was so much that I wanted to say, but time and space just wouldn't allow me to get it all in. So I focused primarily on entertainment as a means of propaganda, and how in the 1980s, here in Washington, D.C., various entertainment entities, Howard's TV station, we had access to 3 Black-owned radio stations. We had 4 Black newspapers. And through the medium that we control, we were able to create a new narrative about the presence of African people in the world. It was a narrative that, in my mind, helped to make Washington, D.C. in the late 80s and early 90s ground zero for the African Center movement. And so I talked specifically about things that were happening in D.C. at that time relative to entertainment, the media, and Dr. Welsing. My desire to be a part of this project comes out of my long-standing relationship with Dr. Welsing. I knew her older sister, Lauren, before I met her younger sister, Frances. And the fact that we're both from Chicago, I would oftentimes travel to Chicago during the holidays to visit family. And I would oftentimes go over to Dr. Welsing's mother's house and meet with them and talk with them. And as a result, I grew to appreciate Dr. Welsing as a colleague, as a friend. She was my therapist, and I was her advisor with issues regarding publishing and things of that nature. So we had a mutually beneficial relationship. And what else was so special and meaningful to me about Dr. Welsing was the fact that she and my mother shared the exact same birth date and birth year, March 18th, 1935. And Dr. Welsing, as a clinician, was able to help me process some issues that I was having with my mom, so that I could be the son that I longed to be. And what was really interesting, one fact that I'd like to share that's not a part of my narrative in the book, but what was interesting is that my mom passed on October the 30th, 2015. And several days after the passing of my mom, I went in to see Dr. Welsing because I just had a lot of things in my heart, my head that I wanted to get out. And I wound up having a 3-hour conversation with Dr. Welsing, just processing some issues and thoughts and feelings that I had regarding the passing of my mother. So we talked for 3 hours, and then I spent 2 hours talking with her about some issues that she was having. So we had a 5-hour marathon on November the 3rd in 2015. And then 2 months later, she was gone. And so to lose both my physical mother and my cultural mother in the span of 40 some odd days was a challenge for me. It was a shock, but to be able to honor both of these women has helped me, understand and appreciate who I am as a person of African ancestry. And it also reinforces my desire to help spread the word of what the issues that Dr. Welsing dedicated her life to. And that is to help African people see themselves as African people and to help us understand the greatest challenges that would ever confront us as African people, and that is racism and white supremacy. So Dr. Welsing gave us a prescription, a methodology. She dedicated her life for over 30 years to speaking to this subject matter. And she was unwavering. There were people here in Washington, D.C., particularly at Howard, who were afraid of Dr. Welsing, afraid of the positions that she took. And she had more courage than most men that I knew. She was fearless. And I think because of that fearlessness, it prompted the enemies of Black folk to fear her, and the lovers of Black folk to embrace her while she was alive, and embrace her even more now that she's an ancestor. And so this piece is important to me. This book, the Osiris Papers, is important to me because of all of the people that I know and have come to know who have contributed to this great work. You, Paul, for taking on the responsibility as Black Classic Press to make this work available. My good friend, Michael Brown, did the cover for this work. Michael Brown I met on my first trip to Egypt in 1980, phenomenal artist. So there have been so many people whose lives mean so much to me who have been a part of this work. So it's a phenomenal cultural collaboration that I think stands as a testimony to how we celebrate one of our giants and keep their memories alive, so that those who did not know her name will be able to hear those who knew and loved this giant of a woman talk about what she meant to us, so that through our own experiences, they can feel the power of Dr. Welsing. And as Denise has said earlier, we're in another pandemic. You know, racism and white supremacy is a pandemic that Black folk have been dealing with for at least 400 years. So we know pandemics, but we've also had people, fearless and courageous souls, who have given us a path to negotiate difficult times. And Dr. Welsing has certainly done that. And the Osiris Papers illuminates this path from various perspectives, and I think provides us with the psychological and spiritual nourishment that we need in order to continue, this great struggle and be able to become the people that Dr. Welsing always knew we had the potential to be. And if I could say just one last thing too about the media, I referenced in my piece the powerful program called For the People that was created, produced, and hosted by Elizabeth Middleton of South Carolina Educational Television. It was that program, which was aired on Howard University's TV station in the late 80s, that they galvanized the DC community. And Elizabeth had all of the scholars, all of the African-American scholars who have made significant contributions to our understanding of who we are as African people. Dr. Welsing, Elizabeth had all of those people on the show, and Dr. Welsing and Dr. Ben and Asa Hilliard were probably three of the most popular guests on that show. So Dr. Welsing so thoroughly understood the significance of a television program that was producing positive propaganda to help heal the consciousness of African people that she literally prescribed watching that program For the People for her patients, because they would have an opportunity to see brilliant African women and men, scholars, scientists, philosophers, psychologists, thinkers, talk about African people in such a way that it transformed the consciousness of Black folk who never knew that we had this capacity, who never knew that we had this history. So she understood how to use the media as a tool to liberate the minds of African people. And this book is a form of media, is a form of mass communication. And by reading this work, we can begin to intone the spiritual essence of Dr. Welsing as viewed by all of the contributors, and allow her to live inside of us so that we then become the vessels to which she can continue her legacy.
Okay. Tony, thank you so much. So while we're doing this, Natalie is, again, going over the questions that are coming. And I ask you just to hold them for a few. I wanted to make sure that we brought our contributors in, our participants in, and make sure that you get a full sense of them. Natalie, Natalie, you on?
Yes, I am.
Oh, great, 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 great. So what will happen is I'm going to introduce Dr. Jeremiah Wright, have him do his presentation, and then if you can line up some questions, we'll just go over. We're a little ahead of when we wanted to start, but we can go ahead into the questions after that. I want to apologize to you, Natalie, and I want to apologize to everybody on the call because I am the culprit. I am why we don't have that video playing, Tony. So here's what happens. This whole thing about Zoom bombing, most of it's inside of the sharing of screens, okay? There's a level of security and the option inside that when you open it up, it actually allows for everybody on this call to share to some degree. I shut that down. And in shutting that down, it shuts down our ability to bring up the video.
Okay.
So we're going to bypass the video at this point. We're going to be without the video. The other thing is I'm afraid to go in and turn it on because I don't know what will happen at that point either. So we're having a great call right now. And let's just stay with it. We got plenty of time for questions and answers. And Dr. Wright, Dr. Jeremiah Wright, I was reminded, and thank you, I was reminded yesterday there are 2 Dr. Wrights in this book. Look, we're so glad to have you with us, Dr. Wright. And of course, we would have been at Trinity yesterday, so we would have had a great time in Chicago as well. But by introduction, please let me introduce you. Dr. Jeremiah Wright is a historian of religions with a terminal degree from the Divinity School of the University of Chicago, as well as a BA degree from Howard University. There's a theme running here, y'all.
Me too.
Dr. Wright has also been honored with at least 10 honorary degrees from schools, colleges, and universities. He has mentored a doctoral program in African-centered religious thought and co-mentored 2 doctor of ministry programs with Drs. Jawanja Kunjufu, Cornel West, Malefi Asante. Dr. Wright has also lectured extensively in the US and abroad at colleges and universities in Ghana, Togo, Benin, Brazil, South America. He has received numerous honors and awards celebrating his lifelong academic, pastoral and preaching work in the fields of Black liberation theology and African-centered practical theology. In addition, Dr. Wright also served as the senior pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago for 36 years until his retirement. Dr. Wright, I'm really pleased that you're here, not being from Chicago. Everyone invited me to Trinity while you were there and I didn't make it, and I'm sorry. You know, it's my loss. But I do know that you certainly, as one of our warriors, as one of our strong warriors, have made numerous contributions to us. I know that you've been close to some of our great fighters too, like Ace and like Jake. So I'm really honored to introduce you and thank you for being on this call. And if you could tell us, as I've asked other people, why did you respond to Ray? Why did you present the piece? You had a difficult one. I think Denise also had a particularly difficult piece because you're dealing with Francis and religion. And you had to deal with that in a way that certainly was central and centered in who you are, and in a way that acknowledges Francis. And that wasn't an easy task. So thank you. And can you talk about, I'm citing some of your difficulty. It may not have been difficult for you at all. It would have been difficult for me. But can you talk about, first of all, why you're in this collection, why you responded as you did, and the challenges of writing as you wrote your essay, you put your essay together?
I responded yes, because in talking to Ray, he gave me the litmus test and listed Conrad Worrill and luminary Paul Coates, and he had to tell me who your son was because he thought I was stupid for being included among such a, and Chuck D, I'm coming back to him, I was honored, as Tony Browder said, I was honored to have my name listed with those names. I tried to get out of it. Ray was very persuasive. Now my challenges, you listed one of them. I think I told Ray this. I know I told Dr. Ivor Carruthers. The difficulties in writing this chapter resulted in the stroke that you hear me wrestling with now, affecting my left side of my body and my voice. Ray and Denise kept giving me deadlines. We need your final copy. I think the first one was July. Then they said August. Then they said your final is September 7th. The night of September the 6th. I sat in my office until I finished it and proceeded to have my stroke that night.
Oh, God.
You guys did it to me.
That's cold, Dr. Wright.
Oh, boy,
that's cold.
It's true. And part of my struggle, Asa and I talked about it for many, many years. Part of my struggle was, as I looked at the list of the names of contributors to this all-important volume and thought about the all-important work of Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, I didn't see any churchgoers. I said, here we go again. Because normally across the years, whenever I've had audiences that are not church people, they came at me on the attack, not knowing anything about me.
Not true, Jeremiah. Go ahead.
So I was nervous about that. But then when I heard Tony just mention Willie Wilson, there's some other Christian, well, let me go back to Asa. The people that Francis knew and worked with, Sakoni Karanja, Ayana Karanja, Ivor Carruthers, Jake Carruthers, Asa Hilliard, Patsy Hilliard, Dr. Bobby Wright. I guess it started with Bobby. Bobby's wife belonged to our church. Conrad Worrill's wife belonged to our church. Anderson's wife belonged to our church. Maulana Karinga held a meeting on me. He wanted to know what we were doing over there. Get all these black warriors at one church. What is he saying? Well, Bobby used to always be real hard on the black church until members of our church started challenging him on the things our church was trying to do as African-centered. So he changed his presentations to read or to sound like this. Now the black church, with the exception of Trinity Church in Chicago, the black church is guilty of, and he go on and talk about the things the black church is guilty of. Been working with Sakoni Karanja. Sakoni had Asa come in every year to talk to the Center's Funeral Horizons faculty and staff, 500 people, about different aspects of African-centered education, early childhood education. One year when Asa was there, I had a funeral the night before, burial that day. So I was late for the presentations. I did not want to walk down the auditorium aisle in front of everybody being late. So I went around the back, came into the back behind Asa. He didn't see me. Asa knew me, but he didn't see I was behind him. And he said something very powerful that day. He talked about how, like Wilhelm Goethe, he thought he knew orchids. Goethe said he thought he was an expert on orchids until he saw them growing naturally in a natural environment in Africa. For the first time, he understood orchids. And Asa said when he was living in Africa, he heard some drumming one night, and it was haunting. He couldn't sleep. He got up, got dressed, and went out looking for the origin of the music, the drumming that he was hearing. And he walked into the middle of a religious ceremony, and he said, quote, "I understood for the first time what I grew up seeing in my grandmother's Pentecostal church in East Texas."
Mm.
And I said, "Oh, is that so?" So I waited until after they had dismissed and people left. I said, "You grew up in the Pentecostal church?" He said, "Yes, I was born and raised Pentecostal. I choose to be AME." I said, "Why don't you say that when the Association of Black Psychologists meet? All ABSI members beat up on Christians, Black Christians, said leave Muslims alone because of Naeem. But why don't you let them know you're a Christian?" He said, "It's none of their business." None of their business who I worship, what I do. I said, "Yeah, but the Christians need some support." Well, the icing on top of that cake, I just wrote about it in my memoirs, was when Bobby was dying. 2 doctors who were caring for him at the Presbyterian Hospital said to me on a Sunday night, "If you want to see your friend again," because by this time we become friends, and he was teasing me about trying to steal his wife away from the Comedic Institute, "you better see him because he's not going to make it the next Sunday." I went to see Bobby, and he paid me a compliment, Paul, like none other. He said, "You know, Rev, if I could get out of this hospital and join anybody's church, it would be your church." Now I'm saying to myself, which one of my tremendous sermons has convinced you? He said, "You know why?" I said, "No, why?" And I'm standing waiting for him to tell me what sermons he had memorized. He said, "Your church members are the only people I've ever met in the African Christian community who don't proselytize. They don't tell me I'm going to hell. They don't try to get me to confess Jesus before I die. They just present themselves as human beings and treat me as a human being. And that, to me, is what Jesus the African was all about." Well, having that context of folk, I never tried to convert him. I never tried to convert Minister Farrakhan. He's never tried to convert me. A white person, Tony Campolo, gave me this mantra: we can disagree without getting a divorce. That the African, I was trying to remember what Conrad called it in his essay. Francis was trying to develop a code, a system for understanding and looking at the African condition and coming up with remedies to address that condition. Denise ends her chapter with that prophecy. And as we work together, we have different beliefs, but this is not about religion. It's not about faith. It's not about what we profess privately. It's about who we are as Africans. I had to tell one of my mentors, a very famous pastor in Detroit, who was mad at me because of my support for the Million Man March. I said to him, "Doc, what is most important to you? The fact that you are an African-American male or the fact that you are a Christian?" He said, "The fact that I'm a Christian." I said, "Okay, let me ask you another way. What is the most important sociological fact of your life? The fact that you're an African-American male or the fact that you're a Christian?" He said, "I still have to say what Paul says, for me to live is Christ, for me to die is Christ." I said, "You're not listening, Doc." I said, "Sociological." He said, "I still say the same thing, Jeremiah." I said, "What does your driver's license say? What does your birth certificate say? And then cops pulled out of the car and started whipping on Rodney King's head. They didn't care if he said, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, thank you, Jesus, hallelujah to Christ. They beat him because he was a black man in America. That's the most important sociological fight, and that's what the march is about. It's not about belief. There's some people at that march who believe in Buddha, some people who believe in the Kemetic Osiris, Isis, and Horus, some people who believe in Allah, Muhammad, Malcolm X, Malik al-Shabazz, some people who believe in Elijah Muhammad, some people who believe in Louis Farrakhan, the latest messenger, others who believe there's no other name given among men whereby we must be saved other than the name of Jesus. That's theology. This march ain't about theology, it's about sociology. Frances Cress Welsing's book and her teachings about African people on the continent and in the diaspora. And that's one of the critiques I raised in terms of she gives Christianity the blues, white Christianity. She didn't talk about herself. I was coming back to Chuck D. Chuck D, when he describes for Harry what happened when that emblem went up, a public enemy, and the hair stood up on the back, the tears well up in his eyes. That's religion. What Asa saw in the bush in Africa, that's religion. Frances does not critique religion in the Isis Papers. She critiques Christianity, and rightly so, especially white Christianity and Uncle Tom's and Aunt Thomasina's who buy into that crap. But I would be interested. Vincent Harding's daughter, Rachel Harding, is a consecrated Mais Santo and Candomblé. Her book, Refuge in Thunder, Alternative Spaces for Black. That's religion. And I would love to see how Frances and her critical mind of psychiatrists dealt with African beliefs. Harriet Tubman, the movie was nice, but they did not talk about the fact that when she fell out flat on the ground, she was going into trances. Those trances do not fit into a Freudian or even a Jungian understanding in terms of psychiatry about religion. She was an ordained elder, itinerant elder in the A.M.B. Zion Church. I would love to engage or see Dr. Cress Welsing engage African religions in terms of the white supremacy and racism. And you asked me about yesterday about critiquing, not a critique of it. I mean, nothing to take away from her excellent scholarship.
Right.
I just wish I could have engaged her on that level.
And Doc, I think you did an excellent job. And I don't think it took away at all. I think you did a critique and celebration. If you can, and if you will, panelists, bear with me for one moment, because someone has asked for the name of the book. It's the Osiris Papers. And look, Nat, we ready for questions? Because I'm gonna put this first one to Ray, and then you can go ahead and jump in with the questions, please. Are we ready?
Yes.
Good. So Ray, how did we come up with what's up with the name? How do we get to this?
Well,
Winbush?
Well, you know, Frances actually answers that question herself in the beginning, in the introduction to Isis Papers. As you know, Isis was the goddess of life and the giver of life, if you please, in Kemetic theology. And what we decided, was that I thought the balance, since Frances had made her transition, Osiris was over the underworld or the of dead. And so we wanted it to be a balance. Isis Papers You know, I preferred Osiris Set, which were the, you know, more Kemetic names as opposed to Isis and Osiris. But since Francis used Isis, we decided to go with Osiris. It's that simple.
Got it. I think it was a beautiful choice. But of course, I'm the publisher. What do I get to say? And Tony, let me just do a shout out because Tony mentioned Mike Brown, who's the cover artist here. Mike is a brother out of DC, a tremendous artist, works in all forms and all mediums. He did this portrait of Francis, and I think almost universally we agreed that it was the one that should be on the book. And that's how he got on the book, and we're very fortunate to work with him. Nat, can you start us off?
Sure. So the great thing about it is that most folks who have chimed in on the chat seem to have that understanding and a familiarity with Dr. Welsing. One question that has shown up, though, is that folks have asked, what is the difference between white supremacy and just an extension of European colonialism and racism? So one of our contributors, I don't know who wants to tackle that. Is there anyone who wants to tackle that?
Well, let me.
White supremacy.
Go ahead, Conrad.
Is a philosophical engineered idea that grew out of the sages of Western intellectual thought. Hegel, Montesquieu, Jung, Locke, who created a philosophical and theoretical framework for the supremacy of white people. Racism is a manifestation of that we see in practice. So one of the things that we missed out on connecting with Francis and the work of one of my mentors, Dr. Jacob Carruthers, was fusing the philosophical, conceptual development of the idea of white supremacy with Francis' idea of white supremacy to merge them in the development of a social theory. But that's my take on it.
Yeah, let me add to what Conrad just said. I think also, you know, if you read Marimba Ani's book, Yorugu, which many of us have, and she's a contributor to the Osiris Papers, I think sometimes we try to distinguish between European colonial systems such as capitalism, Marxism, democratic socialism, and what Marimba argues in Yorugu is that all of these systems have at its basis the issue of white supremacy. They're motivated by white supremacy. You know, I once told some of my students that I said, if when the old Soviet Union was together, that if you know, Marxism united so-called communists, then Mao Zedong and Khrushchev would have gotten along better with each other. But they didn't, and it was because of race. And so race, you know, you want to talk about like Marcus Garvey, race is first. And racism is a guiding, functional, and the only functional system of racism on this earth. So I think that sometimes we get confused as Black folk in somehow thinking that socialism is different from, you know, democratic socialism. And they all come from the form of white supremacy, all of them. Marimba comments a lot on that in her book, Yorugu.
Got it. What else you got, Nat?
Okay, so speaking of, there is one other thing I want to do, a bit of housekeeping, because I think that we have other contributors on the call. And so I would ask that they please just drop me a note in the chat box. I believe earlier I saw Ife was on. And so if we have other contributors who are here, we've got a couple hundred folks on this call. So if you could just drop me a note, so I can't find you all, I'd appreciate that.
Pilar Penn on it too.
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Ray?
Pilar Penn, the chapter on law.
Okay, I thought I saw M Penn, and I thought that may have been Pilar, because what we could do is just, quickly have those folks do a, talk about what their piece is, just a really quick 2-minute check-in, I think. One of the other questions.
That's on you. You've got that.
Yeah, April and I will be watching the chat to get a message. But
Okay.
and actually, April, I'm going to ask you to go ahead if you can find Pilar and Ife. If we can unmute them, that would be great, because then we'll have them. There you go. Pilar is here, so I'm going to take Pilar right now and unmute her so that she can introduce herself.
You mean you're not going to let Paul read the introduction?
I'm
Okay.
sorry. No, I'm not prepared for that one.
No. So, okay, Pilar, I have you unmuted. Can you please confirm?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Greetings, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I have been traveling, and I just got back from Brazil. I've been out of the country now for 5 years. And when Ray asked me to do this chapter on law, I was living in Saudi Arabia. And it was quite a challenge to wrap my head around what I was being asked to do. But because it was Ray, as everyone else has said, I was just honored, because I met Ray when I was a student in law school at Vanderbilt. And when I received Ray's request to be a part of this, I was quite shocked and honored at the same time. And to see all the lovely people that I was a part of working on this book has just been one of the best honors of my career. I learned about Dr. Frances Cress Welsing when I was a child. And I think that because I had some understanding of her work before I got into the law, a lot of the things that would have gone over my head about the law just hit home with me when I was able to put her work together with what I was experiencing in the law. And so that's kind of where I came from when I wrote my piece. And yeah, so I'm glad to be here.
Uh-oh. Sorry, Paul, you were muted.
Thank you. I was just saying thank you.
It's nice to see you, Pilar. It's nice, as one of the people who worked on the book, it's good for me to just see who some of you all are. And I know you can't see me. I've got a problem with my camera, but it's great to see folks' faces. Ife, you are also unmuted. Would you like to jump in on this?
Can't hear you, Ife.
Okay, looks like she may not be on there. Okay, so while we work with Ife, maybe we'll get her in the chat box real quick. Now there's a question, a couple people have asked questions around the continent of Africa, and do we know where the continent stands in terms of some of the things that Frances Cress Welsing talked about in her theories? I don't know that we can answer that question because it is in Africa, but people have asked that. And I don't know if there's anyone who wants to add any perspective around it or whether or not that even serves us, because I don't really recall folks in the book talking about that a whole lot.
Well, I brought it up with Ray, but it's so much, and I'm sure there'll be other contributions to Frances' legacy. But Ray and I did have a discussion about the relationship of the work of Sheikh Anta Diop to Frances. Right. And he and I went back and forth on that, but there is a connection, but it just didn't get entered in this particular piece. But as time goes on, I think people will make the connection in other writings. So this is just the beginning and a great start to Frances's contributions.
Ray, can you go back over, please? Because Ife mentioned her contributions. I mean, her contribution. You selected the contributors to match up with the 9 areas
Right.
of human activity that Francis, and so I don't know, can you talk a little bit, since Ife is not on, not able to talk, can you talk a little bit about her selection and her contribution?
Well, you know, Ife is a political science. Her doctorate is in political science, and she wrote the chapter on politics. She's also president of the African Heritage Studies Association, founded by John Henry Clark. And she was just like and she's a scholar. And so she knew about Francis, heard her speak and so forth. So we asked her to do it and she agreed to do it.
Got it.
And let me add this, Paul,
Sure.
like with Conrad, is that we hope that the Osiris Papers is the first in a series of books and writings and journal articles about Francis. There aren't, I should say, that many people talking about the global system of white supremacy. You know, people talk about driving while Black, flying while Black, you know, whatever, health disparities and all of these things, but they're all about racism, white supremacy. So we hope that this book will be studied, not just read, but studied and add, you know, to some of the discussion on that. I think I always thought that Denise and Reverend Dr. Wright, you know, as you said, Paul, had 2 of the most difficult chapters to write. Denise's chapter because of sexuality. And I remember that her first draft of that chapter was like 4,000 pages long or something like that. So I think both of those chapters were hard to write, but we hope that others will begin to write and to talk about some of the contributions that we made in the book.
Right, thank you.
Okay.
Now, what you got?
So we also have Ya is also on the call and she is unmuted.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, yeah.
I don't know. Can you see me or not?
We cannot see you, but we can hear you.
Okay. Well, first of all, this is one of the second chapters on education that Dr. Winbush has asked me to do. And I was extremely honored and extremely feeling very privileged. One of the things that I was trying to do with that chapter, I've been having a lot of problems lately about so many of our books and lectures not dealing directly with the grassroots people, not dealing directly with especially our younger students. When we talk about white supremacy and the educational system, my thoughts went to this time, I want to deal with the people. I want to deal with the grassroots people. That's why I made a decision to call this Voices Echoing Change. So what I really centered that chapter around was going around to different educators, to principals, to teachers that taught on the college level, but basically to people who taught our youth and get their opinions. And so you have a series of voices that tell how white supremacy affected them when they were coming up. I mean, one of the stories in there is by a woman who's 92 now, and she talks about that. That was the goal that I wanted, because when I taught at Sankofa International Academy, I taught everything from 5-year-olds up to 12 and 13-year-olds. And part of the required reading for them was the Osiris Papers. Even the younger kids, we would read the book together, so we knew about Francis Cress Welsing. But that's what my goal was to try to bring in the grassroots people, make them feel comfortable when they read that chapter, make them feel like they were not excluded when we talk about white supremacy and about the injustice of that they were also part of the whole. So that was very important to me. And also pointing out a lot of when I'm just going to take women, when I taught at Sankofa Academy, I mentioned in the book that they took pride, even though it was a school based on African education, their pride was that a student would graduate and go to Yale, or a student would graduate and go to Princeton. Like that gave them some power over somebody who went to Central State University, where I went, or to Howard University. So the chapter was just supposed to, for me, was dedicated to the grassroots people, to the people out there that I wanted to bring attention to, that the people at ground zero when it comes to white supremacy.
Thank you, yeah.
Okay, so people, we also have a question. Someone is asking, how would a person implement and communicate this book amongst our youth today, and how do they think it would be received? I know Denise works with young folk today, really younger than the rest of us, I think. And so it's open, but that's the question. How do you think you could communicate it to the youth?
It's a great question.
Denise, you on?
Yeah, I know I was muted the whole time.
Okay.
All right. Basically, in terms of I guess communicating or communicating some of the concepts in the books is extremely important. What I found in terms of working with youth over the past year, I've been working specifically with high school students. There's always a lot of questions around, you know, what their perception is or why is this happening? And a lot of kids don't get answers that they need, or there's not someone there to actually explain to them from a historical context what we're seeing, what they're seeing. Why are they feeling what they're feeling? And what I also find is that the youth that are just most informed about their history are the ones that have the least issues with depression and anxiety, because they're able to take understand the history and put it in some kind of context in terms of where they are in the present and what they're seeing in the present. And it gives them a sense of confidence, and it puts them in a certain, and gives them a certain perspective. So when they look and see what other things are going on, they're able to apply judgment in terms of what's going on in social media. They may choose to understand and know, you don't talk a certain way. This is why this is happening. We can never, ever, 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 like in what Ya was talking about in her book, her chapter, we cannot rely on the existing educational system to give us what we need for our kids, period. It doesn't work that way. It was never designed that way. I lived in Washington, D.C. I've been living here for 32 years. About 10 years ago, they got rid of all the older Black teachers who knew the kids, knew how to manage them, knew their mama, knew the community, knew their sister, and knew their brother. Once that happened, that broke up a whole different type of issue with regard to educating the kids. Because a lot of these kids, you got to remember, we had the crack epidemic, 20 years ago, 25 years ago? So those people had kids, and then their kids are coming up. There's a lot of things that were going on back then that present now what we're seeing. And we need to have a more robust programs on a community level to address some of these things. It's extremely important. This is what I'm saying. This is the other thing. I want to just say this. We have to have more youth who are oriented to science and engineering. We see a paucity of people in the public health. We really need people in public health. Epidemiology, okay? All right? All the agrarian sciences. We need these people, and we need to have our kids steered into these areas in order to prepare for the future. Water management, that's going to be a real big thing. We're dealing with food deserts. We're going to be dealing with water shortages, and there's a number of other things. Public health, being able to look at pandemics and stuff. We need these people in the mainstream to inform the community about what's going on. So one of the residual effects of white supremacy is folks sitting around waiting for somebody to tell them something. Well, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. And when you give, you may give the person the water, but they may not drink it. But when they are around people, or they've been oriented and educated about what's going on, it's a totally different thing. Totally different thing. Because the kids begin to learn and understand and be able to rationalize based on what they see, their history, and deductive reasoning. We need this kind of stuff. So when Yah was talking about that in her particular chapter, as well as others hinted throughout their chapters, we need to take more ownership of what we're doing right now. Okay. We need to be active in our communities and all of that. And so that's basically what I have to say about that.
Can I still be heard or not? Am I muted?
You are. Can we check in with Nat, Yah?
No problem.
She got a whole parcel for you, and you can comment.
I can comment. I just wanted to. I do.
Hold on one second. I would like to say quickly that we finally have Ife in. So I think she had to go back out and come back in. But yeah, if you want to build on that, you can. I think Denise has done a great job. But let's get Ife in on the conversation. Yeah. Oh, well, you want to find out whether or not we can extend.
I do. I just want to acknowledge our time. Our call was supposed to end at 7:30. We're about 7:31 right now, and with the permission of I want to say of our elders, but I'm getting up there too. But starting with our permission of our elders and everyone on the call, we can go another 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so. We wanted to see how the question was going, and we didn't want to just ignore the time. So I just want to acknowledge the time. Is everybody cool with that, panelists?
Good. Yeah. Go ahead.
Let's go.
All right.
Sasife, and then yeah.
Okay, I'll be quick. And I just want to tell Dr. Wright that I am a virtual member of Trinity Church.
Wow.
So not everyone in the book is anti-church. And I too was honored that Ray asked me to be a part. He usually tries to include me on things. And my chapter was on her views of politics. And so what I focused on was white supremacy. I was introduced to Dr. Welsing's work as a graduate student. I attended Clark Atlanta University Department of Political Science that focuses on the on Black people throughout the diaspora. So I had a very unique education. So I read it years ago. And to exemplify her theories of white supremacy, I looked at genocide, and most particularly police brutality, and how basically we do not have any redress against police brutality, and it's a form of eliminating our population. And it's very interesting that she talked about pandemics, and she talked about Ebola as one of the ways to eliminate the Black race. And now we find ourselves here with COVID. So it's very timely that she just prophesied that she knew that this was going to happen. I mean, it's just normal. Like everybody says, well, Black people are the ones suffering the most from COVID. And, my reaction was, well, what else is new? It's just playing out what we already know, the whole trajectory of white supremacy and where we're going until we organize and put a stop to this. So thank you. And it was great meeting you in Washington. And I'm just glad to be part of this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Was y'all following up, or did you have something else now?
Yeah, you want to go ahead?
No, I just, Denise, adding to what you said about how do we reach our youth, one of the things that, because my chapter is on education, I know so many educators, we are, with my chapter, we're turning it into a performance chapter. Wow. Where we will actually invite high school students, and we were going to, but we still will be able to do that when things open back up. The people whose voices are represented in that chapter will literally perform those voices, and including the 92-year-old. And we will have a back and forth conversation with youth, because one of the ways, I'm in theater myself, but one of the ways in reaching our youth is to bring it in a format that they'll pay attention to. So that's one of the things that I'm saying that we're doing with those voices. We're turning them into performance pieces with professional actors, not just any, they are professionals. That's it. That's what I had to say.
Thank you. Thank you, yeah. Natalie, can we get a commercial in here?
Sure. Do you want to be the commercialist?
Because I don't have the stuff.
Okay.
I want you to send folks to the website when they get off.
I do. So yeah. So let me share this really quickly. A couple things. The book is over. I think we're close to 400 pages on this book now. I don't have mine. I had to give it away to someone who's working on the audio book for this. So I don't have my copy in front of me, but we're talking about a very comprehensive book, which I believe is close to 400 pages. And it's not just, you know, the 9 areas. We've got poetry at the end of it, you know, in honor of Dr. Welsing. And then, you know, we've got, so much is in this book. There you go, Denise has it up. So and everybody's putting it up now. We got big commercial going on. So it really is a comprehensive, it has an index in it. And I think that as people, you know, even ask, how do you do it? You know, how do you share this with someone else? Having read that book, all these chapters several times, I think you have to read it and be able to take it and reinterpret it. You know, I think that you have to read that. Like one of the things that's often repeated is people talk about something that was mentioned in the movie Boomerang, and the pool table being green and the black ball happened to be not, like that was using entertainment as a way. And that was one of her concepts and something that she talked about. It's very popular, but I think that we can take all those chapters and look at and get the nuggets out of each of them. And fortunately, these contributors have dived deep into the concepts. And I think to take the time and read through them, it's not a book you're going to rush through, but you take the time to do that. So I'll say that I'll say the book has been priced very, very well. Paul and I had always gone around on the price of a book, and it's priced very well at $24.95. It can be purchased and I'm going to put this down in the chat box for everyone. It can be purchased on our website. Additionally, we're going to do a flash sale for every book on our website. If you write down the code OSIRIS, Osiris, you place an order and you use the code Osiris until Tuesday, you will get 40% off of your entire order. So I know there are folks on this call who already have this book, because I've seen your names on the orders and I know you're on the call. But this is an opportunity to also to order other books as well, to order other things that are on the website as well. This is a great time to, if you have kids who are if you have seniors, look, now I'm really gonna do a big commercial here.
Look, you're doing great. Well, we unleashed her.
If there are seniors that you all know of who can't get out, like and don't use the computer very well, this is a great opportunity to go online to any of the Black booksellers, any of the online Black bookstores, and order a book and have it sent to those folks. More often than not, those are the people who end up calling us on the phone wanting to place an order for a book. Not everybody is staffed 24 hours anymore, so please go online. Your favorite booksellers, www.blackclassicbooks.com, and order a book for someone. It's a great time. This is a great time to do that.
So Nat, you really, really did that.
Now I'm done.
And I just want to add one thing to it. And did I cut you off? Were you getting ready to add something?
No, I was going to say now I'm done.
Okay, cool. So I just want to add one other thing to that. We want you to go to our site. We want you to support Black Classic Press. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you to do this. We want you to, even if you don't go to our site, go to any other Black bookseller who has this book or other books. Now is the time that the Black bookstores really, really need our support. Critically, I'm talking to booksellers every day. And it would help so much if at this point, if you just said, well, I'm gonna buy one Black book a week, I don't even care what store you go to, but I'm gonna buy one Black book a week to help support these folks, because most of them, all of them literally are shut down. So you can buy it from our site, it's cool, but otherwise, go to one of the Black booksellers, they have it, and they'll do it. So we appreciate you, we love you and all like that, and so do those booksellers.
And so, Paul, I do want to say something else. We've titled this year, at least in-house for ourselves, as we're trying to pull together what it would look like. We've titled this book, we envisioned it as being a year of conversation. And we really did think that we were going to be doing a lot of different events in a lot of different cities, and even at some of the booksellers, across the country. As it turns out, we have to do, an alternate format. And I see that some of the comments folks are saying, oh, we were just getting into it. We were getting good, and now it's time to end. And so what I would say is, hopefully you're on our email list. If you're on our email list, we will continue to communicate with you other opportunities to dig into this conversation, as we're looking at how do we, shape those things differently as the year goes on. So, I ask you to join the email list. You will be in continuation with you. And this isn't the last one. This is April. We did a year of conversation, and this is just the 4th month in. So there will be more coming from us.
And Nat, I realize we've used about 7 minutes, 8 minutes of the time. We actually can go on. The thing is, I just wanted to respect people's time. We can go on to 8 o'clock. We plan to call to end 1.5 hours, but with permission of the group. And I know people have questions. Still, we got Dr. Wright we got the doctors right on the phone. We got Ray, we got Tony. And I don't think Tony has he did his introduction thing. So we can go on. We just wanted to get that in to you guys and make sure. The other thing I want to say, and I'll close, is that everyone who signed on for this is going to be on our mailing list, Nat. You will have the option, if you don't want to be on the mailing list, just opt off, okay? But your names will go on the mailing list. If you want to come off, just opt out. And let's go back to the questions.
Okay, so April, fortunately, has been monitoring because I've been running my mouth. So April says, apparently there's some questions about study groups. People are looking for suggestions on how to start or set up or operate or run a study group that deals with this. Paul's wrinkling his face. So
because I don't know, and I'm looking at Tony, but I've got all these other pictures in front of me. Tony probably
got his hand up. Okay, let's unmute Tony there. All right, Tony, give me a second. It should be unmuting you.
Okay.
All right, you're good.
Great, fantastic. So let me do this right quick. I had referenced earlier, talked about Dr. Welsing's regular visits on WOL. Back in 1990, as a result of a conference we did here in DC with Asa Hilliard and then Jeffries. It was the Miseducation to Education Conference, December of 1989. And Dr. Hilliard closed out the conference by saying that any African who is not a member of the study group in the 1990s would be a traitor to his race. And when I went back on the Kathy Hughes show the following Monday and repeated Dr. Hilliard's statement, Kathy asked me if I would work with WOL to set up WOL study groups. So we created a study group with over 250 people from the entire DMV. And in my book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, which Black Classic Press prints for me, I have a chapter on beginning on page, publication, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, right here, my second book. Michael Brown did the cover for this as well. The same artist who did the cover for the Osiris Papers did the cover for my book. And on page 248, I've got a process for establishing study groups, the number of members that should be in a study group, the officers within the study group. So we have that information available in my book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, on page 248. I also would like to suggest, Paul, that since you weren't able to show the PowerPoint film on Dr. Welsing, you can post that on your Facebook page.
Okay, great.
And people can go to your Facebook page and see that. And matter of fact, Ray, you've got a copy. I think Denise got a copy. So if everybody posts it on their Facebook page, then everybody will be able to see that.
That's great.
And, lastly, I did notice the questions. Someone raised a question about how can they see For the People. You should be able to go online, specifically on YouTube, and find many of the programs that List Development Middleton hosted on For the People. The program is called For the People. The host was List Development Middleton, Middleton, and you'll see numerous lectures with Asa Hilliard, who did a 13-part series entitled Free Your Mind, Return to the Source. Dr. Welsing did numerous presentations, as did Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Sheikh Antejop, and so many others. Yep, so that's it for me.
Nat, can you tell me, or Tony, I don't know, did you see Sabrina on the call? Because I was thinking she might be able to add something about the study group here in DC.
Sure.
She was on the call, I know, yeah.
Is she on the call?
I don't know, I haven't seen her.
Well,
Okay,
let me get in here. One of the, in the formation of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization, 1984, 85, we had a lot of younger people who are now older people. And one of them was Dr. Greg Carr and Mario Beatty. And in the development of ASCAC, the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization, one of the programmatic directions that came from Dr. Clark and other elders was the creation of study groups. And so anybody who's interested in creating study groups around the country might check in with ASCAC and Dr. Carr. They have study groups going on with the next generation all over the country on college campuses and in the community. And if my memory serves me correctly, the ASCAC actually has a manual on establishing study groups. So there are a lot of study group information out here. I think we lost somehow interactions on the idea, but we need to bring it back in the public domain and keep the movement around study groups alive publicly.
Okay, Sabrina.
Yes.
Hi, how you doing?
Still learning.
Okay, got it. That's the best way to be. I don't mean to put you on the spot, and I hope I'm not. But the question, did you hear the question about study groups? And do you want to share some of the experience with Dr. Welsing here in DC with the study group? I guess I can call it a study group.
And let me also say, I apologize. There's some issue for some reason. My video screen isn't showing, and I had to come in and go out, etc. But okay. I'm on. So thank you. So for those of you who don't know, I'm a longtime devoted student of Dr. Welsing's and participated in the Cress Welsing Institute for decades, and have carried forward the Cress Welsing Institute for Psychiatry and Social Research, which was really her crowning jewel. She established and conducted for nearly 30 years, the Cress Welsing Institute, an open forum for discussion of one and only one topic, the system of white supremacy, racism. What it is that we can do with our own behaviors to eliminate the system of white supremacy and replace it with a system of justice. And since her transition, we have carried forward the Institute the second Thursday of the month from September to June, meeting at Howard University at 7 p.m. Certainly since this public health crisis has come on the scene, we're not meeting in person, but we've conducted at least one Zoom Institute meeting, and we plan to do so going forward as well. Indeed, there's so much to say. I would just really implore people to do just a couple of things in the meantime. Number one, and I'm going to put out some materials to support this, but I really want to push forward a campaign to study, share, and memorize Dr. Welsing's functional definition of racism, white supremacy, so that we can internalize what it truly is. And I see from some of the questions in the chat that we still need to move past some of the psychological barriers about the term white supremacy and understand really what it means. And it is not a diminishment of who we are as Black people and all of the contributions, tremendous contributions that we've made to civilization, the world, etc. It is about understanding that those who classify themselves as white are in a superior position, not that they are innately superior. So please, and you can search online, memorize and challenge everyone in your circles to memorize the functional definition of racism, white supremacy. And the second thing I would implore you to do, especially now that we're all at home for the most part, on the every Tuesday morning from 9 to 11 a.m., please tune in to Mr. Neely Fuller Jr.'s Counter-Racist Codification program, an internet radio show. And it's you can tune in at his website, which is producejustice.com, producejustice.com. And there are a number of materials there. You can purchase his book, The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, revised and expanded edition. But please tune in on Tuesday mornings from 9 a.m. to 11. Mr. Fuller is talking about and receiving questions and responding to questions and inquiries and challenges with counter-racist codification, counter-racist science, thought, speech, and action that we do and that we don't do in order to produce the results that we want, which is producing justice. Mr. Fuller was a tremendous influence on Dr. Welsing. Dr. Welsing always spoke of him as a genius, specifically. And we've spent a lot of time kind of wrestling through how it is that you implement this code of behavior. And I would just implore people to really just do just those two things at least, especially during this time when we are on lockdown, so to speak. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sabrina. Did you put your information in the chat for folks? And can you do it if you have not?
Okay, I can do that.
Thank you. Look, so we are going to work our way down. I'm going to go back to the panelists. We've got about 10 minutes to close out. If each of you could take a few minutes to just share with us what your closing thoughts are. Hopefully we'll be able to get together again at some point and do this, take a deeper dive, but particularly, I guess we can start. Ray, do you want to start or you want to finish up? That's your call.
Well, let me just say this. I was looking at several of the questions in the chat room, and people were asking, how could we start like a study group? Sabrina, if you're in this area, I would definitely suggest Sabrina's group at Howard University, and definitely go to Neely Fuller's group, producejustice.com on Tuesdays. I also think that, one person said that she's in LA and that she's not, she's trying to raise people's consciousness about that. I think a systematic reading of the Osiris Papers, along with Mr. Fuller's book, which we call The Code, and you may want to take a chapter or one of the areas. You may want to start with education and spend a month having everybody read it, come together and discuss it, then move on to the next chapter on economics or entertainment. I think there's systematic ways. You know, I think that when you read Dr. Welsing, Mr. Fuller, that you kind of know what to do. It enlightens you, it opens up your mind. So I would encourage everybody to make sure they do a systematic reading of those three books, the Code, Isis Papers, and Osiris Papers as well.
Got it, got it. Denise? This is our closeout, and
basically kind of back to what Ray was saying in terms of becoming more intimate with, and what Sabrina was saying in terms of the functional definitions and all of that, and becoming, and kind of looking at it through the lens of being able to apply and to see in all the different areas that that we'd go over in the book. I think that's extremely important. It's also just to have discussions, just general discussions, you know, not only with your peer group, but also with the younger folk to understand and know how they see the world. That's extremely important.
Got it. Conrad.
Because a lot of those discussions really don't take place too often. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you call on me, Paul?
Yes, I did. I'm sorry.
Okay. So is Reverend Wright still on the line?
He is. He is.
Yeah.
Well, Reverend Wright, you taught me something once again today in this debate we've been having over religion and Christianity and people outside of that set of ideas. And I really appreciate your way of explaining the interconnection of our relationships in the movement, because Francis came out of those interconnection of relationships in the movement. And this is our continuing challenge, to take these relationships, to work these relationships around ideas and take these ideas and build institutions. So Trinity United Church of Christ, although I may not be a member, it's an institution in our community that's African-centered, that has a spiritual base in the Christian context. And we have other institutions like that around the country, very few that have remained out of the 1960s, like the Carruthers Center in Chicago, like the Third World Press, like the New Concept Development Center, and many other institutions around the country. So the merger of ideas and institution building around an African-centered organizational programmatic thrust is still our challenge. And you really hit it on the head, Reverend Wright, for me today on what Asa saw in religion in Africa. I want to thank you.
Thank you, Conrad. Tony B, what you look like? I think they got you muted.
Yes, I am unmuted now. I just want to ask everyone to remember that Dr. Welsing is an ancestor and is part of the African tradition. Our ancestors are still with us, even though they may not physically be present with us. Their spirit is with us, and as long as we remember them, as long as we read their words, think their thoughts, they continue to live in our minds and hearts, and it's our obligation, it's our responsibility to see to it that Dr. Welsing lives forever. And I think this project has added more life to the eternal memory of Dr. Welsing, and I trust that those who come after us will be grateful for the work that we've done in preserving her legacy. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Tony. Dr. Wright, you get to take it on out. I'll say a few words after you, but you get to close out our panelists. Is Dr. Wright active?
Yes.
Good.
I join with Tony, with all the panelists, in thanking those who've gone online to join us. One thing I would encourage us to do Conrad mentioned ASCAC, and one of the persons in the chat room did not know what that was. One of the things that Asa talked about with me is how when we get older, Paul quotes, it becomes like a closed fraternity. We don't share information with the generation behind us. So we start throwing around names like Francis Cress Welsing. They have no idea what we're talking about. Like one of my colleagues at McCormick Theological Seminary, driving down the street with his daughter, teenager. Frankie Beverly Mays came on singing. And she said, "Who is that singing Beyonce's song?" Our kids don't know because we don't tell them.
That's right.
There are many resources. One of the persons in the chat room wanted to know about how you teach this to children. Yeah, Santu, I answered it. Denise Wright answered it. Dr. Asa Hilliard, years ago, put together a curriculum, and he worked with my oldest daughter, Janet, where she started African-centered education at preschool, 3 to 5-year-olds. That kind of information is out there, but it's not. I think we need to find a way to share it with the younger generation behind us, so we don't have to keep going back over the same old material. You heard the true story about the black girl wanting to know who Malcolm X was. Did you get that, Paul?
I did.
She wanted to know who Malcolm X was.
I did, yes.
And that's real and it's sad. And I think one of my mentors, Gaylord Wilmore, I think you have his book in your store, Black Religion and Black Radicalism. Gaylord Wilmore died last night. And Charles Long died, and Kano Felder died.
Absolutely.
Katie Cannon died. And Gracie Hall Wynn. I've met seminarians who don't know those names. They're in seminary, they're in graduate school, and they don't know the names. So I encourage us to make sure we pass on Dr. Cress Welsing's legacy, her work, Dr. Asa Hilliard's work, all of the ancestors who blessed us so richly and upon whose teachings we still lean and learn. I'm not going to give a benediction, Paul. That's up to you.
I could never do it like you, Doc. But what I will do is, first of all, thank everyone for taking the time to join us on this call. We really appreciate that you've set aside this time, and so many people responded enthusiastically. I can't wait. Someone was trying to get into this call yesterday, okay? And they were mad that they couldn't get in, and I had to write them back and say, "Oh, you talking about tomorrow?" They said, "Oh, I'm sorry." So this has been a great opportunity for the family to get together and be together. So I want to acknowledge our contributors. I want to acknowledge Ray, Denise, for all of the hard work of bringing this together. You know, one thing is special about this. When Ray came to me, I immediately said yes, because if you guys notice, Francis has been gone for some time now. There are no white publishers breaking down the doors to do books on Francis Welsing. So we're doing, and what we've done is what we're supposed to do. We celebrate those who are important to us. I think when I said that, do you know there were no books done on Garvey for close to 40 years. I think after, you know, as monumental as he is. The same thing with David Walker. All of the people who are monumental to us, we've contributed in this case to reversing that. We're writing our history. We're doing what any healthy people is supposed to do. And this discussion is a healthy discussion. It's what we're supposed to do and what healthy people do. I want to thank Natalie, whose picture
Natalie and April.
Both of them have been working in the background to make sure this call would go as smoothly as it has. And I want to again just
the book itself.
travel well. I hope everyone will be safe and protect yourself and protect those who are around you. And with that,
I have something to say.
oh, okay. She gets the last, Natalie gets the last word. Okay, I'm cool with that.
So we are recording this session, and we are also recording the chat. And what will happen is that we'll send out via constant contact the information from here so that folks can access it again and folks can see all the great information that was provided in the chat. So I do want to make sure that folks know it will be coming. So it's so thank you for asking, and that we're happy to provide that.
And that we can post it on our site as well, can we not?
Yes, and so that, yes, we can do that. We will do that as well.
And
Now,
we'll
Paul,
make it available to whoever wants to post it.
Right. Right. Okay.
Is that us?
That's it.
All right. Thank you kindly.
Thank you.
We're gonna end the meeting, end the call now. And again, I just have to keep saying thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay?
Thank you.
Dr. Wright, Jeremiah Wright, you take care, brother. Look forward to seeing you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Brother Jeremiah.
Bye, thank you.
Really enjoyed this moment.
Thanks so much.
Take care,
All
family.
right now.
Take care, everybody.
All right, Denise.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and disconnect.
Yes, let's do that. All right.
Yeah, no, we're gonna do a follow-up now. See you tomorrow.